When Lisa Thompson hit send on an email to her old high school sweetheart, Shaquille O'Neal, she figured it would disappear into the digital abyss. It was the 35th anniversary of their graduation from Robert G. Cole High School in San Antonio, Texas. And something about the milestone stirred memories she thought were long buried. After all, Shaq was now one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet. A four-time NBA champion, an entrepreneur, a television personality, even a doctor. He had hundreds of millions of fans. But 3 weeks later, on a quiet Thursday morning, her phone buzzed with a message that would change everything. Shaquille wanted to meet, and he had something to ask her. Something that would shake not just Lisa, but their entire hometown. What began as a simple reconnection would soon unravel a deeply personal journey, bringing the past full circle in ways neither of them could have predicted. Lisa's fingers hovered over her phone screen as she stood by the kitchen window of her small craftsman home. Outside, the San Antonio sun filtered through the leaves of the old pecan tree in her backyard, casting warm dapples of light onto her countertop. The house was quiet. Her husband, Mark, was already at work, managing the same auto body shop his father had owned for decades. Their 2 kids were grown now. Rachel lived in Austin with her fiancé, and Marcus had just started his residency in Houston. At 53, Lisa had grown to cherish these quiet mornings. She sipped from her oversized mug, half coffee, half creamer, just the way she liked it, and opened her photo gallery app. For the last few days, she'd been digging through boxes of old pictures, scanning them onto her phone for the upcoming high school reunion. Most of them made her laugh. Girls with permed hair and shoulder pads, boys in Letterman jackets and acid-wash jeans. But one photo always made her pause. It was taken at the junior-senior prom in the spring of 1989. She was standing beside a towering boy in a white tuxedo, his smile wide, his arms awkwardly long and gentle around her waist. Shaquille O'Neal. Before the Lakers. Before the Magic. Before the 4 championships and countless endorsement deals. Before Shaq Diesel and platinum records and reality TV shows. Back then, he was just Shawnee, her Shawnee. Lisa chuckled softly to herself and shook her head. "Get real," she muttered. That was a whole other lifetime ago. But was it? Because sometimes it felt like just yesterday that she sat courtside at the dusty high school gym, watching him run drills long after everyone else had gone home. She could still hear the echo of the basketball, the squeak of sneakers on the hardwood, the way he grunted with every rebound, every dunk. "I'm gonna make it," he used to tell her, sweat dripping from his forehead, his eyes burning with focus. "I don't know how yet, but I'm gonna make it." And he had. God, had he ever? Lisa turned from the window and walked to the kitchen table, where her laptop sat open. The webpage for the Robert G. Cole alumni site was still up. She'd been browsing it that morning, scanning the list of confirmed attendees for the reunion. That's what had gotten her thinking. That, and the article she'd read the day before. Shaq had just donated $5 million to rebuild a community center in East San Antonio, the very one where they used to volunteer together after school. Something about that gesture had stuck with her. She clicked into her email and opened a blank message. She had found the contact address for Shaq's production company, Shaq Entertainment, on their public website. She had no idea if it would actually go to him. Probably not. It'd most likely be intercepted by a manager or assistant. But still, she began typing. "To whom it may concern, my name is Lisa Thompson, formerly Lisa Ortiz. I was a classmate of Shaquille O'Neal's at Robert G. Cole High School in San Antonio, Texas. We graduated together in 1989. Her fingers hovered. What was she even doing? This was insane. Shaquille O'Neal probably got hundreds of messages like this every week from people claiming to know him. What made her think hers would be any different? But then again, at 53, Lisa had learned not to ignore the tug of the past. Life had taught her that. She kept typing. I don't expect this message to reach Shaquille directly. I understand he's incredibly busy. But on the off chance that it does, I just wanted to reach out on the 35th anniversary of our graduation. We were close during our junior and senior years, and we dated briefly before Shaquille transferred out. We lost touch after that, as people do. I've followed his career from afar and have always been so proud of what he's accomplished. I'm still in San Antonio. I'm a social worker now, helping kids who often come from the same neighborhoods we did. Life has a funny way of bringing things full circle. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say congratulations and thank you for a very special time in my life. If this message does reach him, he might remember me as Liz. He was the only one who ever called me that. Warm regards, Lisa Thompson. She read it over 3 times. Her finger hovered over the send button. This is dumb, she whispered. But she didn't delete it. She took a deep breath and clicked send. Just like that. Lisa stared at the screen for a moment longer, half expecting it to explode or for a pop-up to appear saying message not delivered. But nothing happened. Just the polite confirmation that her email had been sent. Well, that's that, she muttered, getting up to pour herself another cup of coffee. The house was still silent, just the hum of the fridge and the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. That afternoon, when Mark came home, Lisa didn't mention the email. Not because she was hiding it, but because she didn't even know how to explain it. She hadn't written it because she was unhappy. She loved her husband. She loved their life. But something about that part of her past still felt unfinished. Not because of regret, but because of how abruptly it had all ended. That night, as they sat on the couch watching a rerun of Wheel of Fortune, Lisa's mind drifted to a different time, a different version of herself. It was August 1987, their first day of junior year. She had just gotten her driver's license and her mom had let her take the car to school. She'd pulled into the parking lot to find a crowd gathered around the basketball court behind the gym. He's back, someone whispered. Lisa pushed through the crowd until she saw him. Shaquille O'Neal, taller than everyone, all limbs and sneakers and nervous energy. He'd been gone for 2 years, moved away when his stepfather, Sergeant Philip Harrison, had been stationed in Germany. No one expected him back, but there he was. He saw her, and for a moment, the crowd disappeared. "Liz?" he asked, grinning that familiar, crooked grin. "Shawnee," she whispered, too stunned to say more. He came over and picked her up in a giant hug, spinning her once like they were kids again. He was different, bigger, more confident. But the warmth in his eyes was the same. Later that week, they sat by the bleachers after practice. He told her about Germany, about playing basketball against kids twice his size, about how he missed home, missed her. "You're different now," she'd said. "You're not," he replied. "You're still the only person who makes me nervous." They started spending more time together after that, just walking, talking, driving around the city with no real destination. It wasn't quite dating, not yet. But it was something. The memories flooded back now, 35 years later. Lisa turned off the TV and stood, kissed Mark goodnight, and headed upstairs to bed. She didn't know it yet, but the story she thought was long over had just begun a brand new chapter. Because 3 weeks later, on a rainy Thursday morning, her phone buzzed with a new email from s.waneal@shaken.com. Subject, Liz message. "Hey Liz, been a long time. I'm gonna be in San Antonio next week for a thing. Wanna catch up over coffee? Let me know." Shaq Lisa sat in stunned silence, the email glowing like a tiny lighthouse on her screen. He had called her Liz. Only one person in her whole life had ever done that, And that one person had just written back. 3 weeks later, Clarissa was in her office at the Jacksonville Community Health Center, finishing paperwork after a long day. Summer heat had settled heavy over Florida, and the rhythmic chirping of cicadas drifted in through the open window behind her desk. Her phone buzzed. At first, she didn't think much of it. Probably a reminder for Caden's dentist appointment or a group text from her walking group. But when she glanced at the screen, her breath caught. Sender, s.winneal@bigmanmedia.com. Subject, RE, long time. She stared at the name, Shaquille, not Shaq, not an assistant, just Shaquille. Her fingers trembled as she tapped to open the message. Clarissa, I read your message. I was surprised and glad. I'll be in Gainesville next week to speak at a youth basketball camp. If you're around, maybe we could grab coffee? Let me know. Shaquille. It was short, almost cautious, but the way he signed his name, Shaquille, not Shaq, not Big Diesel, not the big Aristotle, like the world knew him. Just him. Clarissa stared at the screen for a long moment, her chest tight with memories. She hadn't heard from him in over 30 years, and yet there it was, like a hand reaching out from the past. She glanced up at the photos on her wall. One of her with her son at his high school graduation, another of her holding her medical degree, a framed quote from Maya Angelou. People will forget what you said, forget what you did, but never forget how you made them feel. Shaquille had made her feel like she mattered once, long before the world discovered him. She hit reply. Shaquille, I'd love that. Just tell me where and when. Clarissa. The moment she pressed send, her hands dropped into her lap, and she sat back in the old swivel chair, heart racing. Part of her was still that 17-year-old girl who'd stood courtside every afternoon while a tall, goofy boy practiced free throws until the sun went down. December 1987. Robert E. Lee High School, San Antonio. Clarissa Jenkins was a junior and a peer tutor in the library. She had a part-time job shelving books and organizing after-school study groups. It kept her busy, which she preferred. She liked structure, predictability. That afternoon, she was late to her shift, arms full of notebooks, hurrying across the gym lobby when she heard the echo of a ball bouncing. Most days, the place was quiet by then. Practice was over, but not today. She peeked through the glass double doors. There he was, alone on the court, 6 feet, 7 inches, in his baggy gym shorts and a white tank, shooting free throws, over and over. The form wasn't perfect yet, but the focus, it was laser sharp. With every miss, he reset. No tantrum, just calm repetition. Clarissa watched for a moment, mesmerized. Then the ball slipped through the net and bounced toward her. Reflexively, she opened the door, caught it, and started to hand it back. That's when their eyes met. Thanks, he said, his voice deeper than she expected. You don't stop, do you? She asked. He smiled, a little sheepish. Not if I can help it. Clarissa extended her hand. Clarissa Jenkins. I'm usually in the library, not the gym. He took it gently. Shaquille O'Neal. I'm usually here, she laughed. Yeah, I kinda guessed. Over the next few months, they bumped into each other more and more. At first, it was just coincidence. Then, it wasn't. Shaquille would come into the library pretending to look for a book, but always left with a question about math. Clarissa would take the long route to class just to pass the gym. They weren't dating, not officially, but it was something. One Friday, he walked her home after school. His pace was slow, like he didn't want the walk to end. You ever think about what comes next? He asked suddenly. Clarissa nodded. All the time. I want to go pro someday, he said. NBA, but first, college. LSU's interested. That's huge, she said, genuinely thrilled for him. He looked at her with an intensity that made her feel like the only person in the world. "But I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of leaving this behind, of changing." Clarissa was quiet. Then she reached out and touched his arm. "You won't change. Not the good parts. Just the circumstances." Shaquille smiled, that crooked, gentle smile that always melted her heart. "You're kind of brilliant, you know that?" Clarissa shrugged. "Well, I am in the top 5% of the class." Spring came, and with it decisions. Shaquille committed to LSU. Clarissa got into the University of Texas with a pre-med track. They promised to keep in touch. But between classes, travel, interviews, and the rapid rise of Shaquille O'Neal from high school phenom to national name, the calls grew less frequent. Then they stopped. By the time he was dominating college courts, then entering the NBA draft as the #1 pick, Clarissa had folded that chapter of her life like an old love letter and tucked it away. She never told anyone, not even her best friend, that her first kiss had been with Shaquille O'Neal behind the bleachers at the spring talent show, that they'd held hands under the cafeteria table, that they had once whispered dreams to each other like they were sacred spells. Now, in 2025, she was going to see him again. Clarissa arrived at the coffee shop in Gainesville 15 minutes early. She chose a small table near the window, her heart pounding like a drum. She had no idea what to expect. Would he be late? Would he even come? Was this just a courtesy meeting? But when the door opened, he ducked slightly to step through. No entourage, no sunglasses, just jeans, a gray hoodie, and that same crooked smile. "Clarissa," he said warmly, as if they'd just seen each other yesterday. "Shaquille." They hugged, an awkward, beautiful collision of nostalgia and nerves. He still smelled faintly of cologne and cedarwood. He had always liked that scent. "You look amazing," he said, sitting down across from her. She laughed. "You're legally obligated to say that to women over 50. "No," he said, eyes crinkling. "I mean it." They ordered coffee, and for a moment, the silence sat between them, thick with 30 years of unsaid words. Then they began to talk about old teachers, about high school dances, about the time he tried to impress her by doing the worm at prom and pulled a muscle. "I had to ice my ribs for a week," he said. "Worth it," she replied, grinning. He asked about her career, her son, her marriage. She asked about his businesses, his kids, his life. For over an hour they caught up, filling in the blanks of the lives they'd lived apart. Finally, Shaquille grew quiet. He stared out the window, then back at her. "There's something I wanted to tell you," he said, voice low. Clarissa's pulse quickened. "I've had a lot of success, money, fame, rings. But when I think back to who I was before all that, it always starts with you." Her breath caught in her throat. "You believed in me when I was just a tall, clumsy kid trying to figure it out. You saw something in me before the world did." She swallowed hard. "I never got to say thank you," he continued. "Or sorry for disappearing." Clarissa shook her head. "You don't owe me an apology, Shaquille." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Her heart skipped. "Do you remember that cheap bracelet you gave me junior year? The one with the little basketball charm?" She nodded, stunned. "I found it in a box when I moved last year. It made me think about that time, about you." He opened the pouch and pulled out a new bracelet. Gold, elegant with a single, small, diamond-studded basketball charm. "I had this made, not because I expect anything, but because that old one meant something." He slid it across the table. Clarissa blinked back tears. "Shaquille, I just wanted you to know," he said gently. "You mattered. You still do." Clarissa slipped the bracelet on her wrist. It sparkled in the sunlight. "I didn't come here expecting anything," she said. "But I'm glad I did." They sat in silence for a moment, watching as the world outside continued on. Cars passing, people walking, unaware that inside a quiet Gainesville cafe, time had briefly folded back on itself. Clarissa never expected the bracelet would change anything. She wore it quietly under the sleeve of her white coat in the clinic, like a secret she wasn't ready to share with the world. But something was different now. It wasn't Shaquille himself. It was the memory of who he used to be, who they used to be, and how it pulled something out of her that she thought had faded. Warmth, laughter, a soft ache for the past that felt less like pain and more like permission to feel again. And yet, despite their reunion at the cafe, they didn't speak for almost a month, until the knock came. February 2025, Jacksonville, Florida. It was raining when she heard it. A deep, confident knock on the door, the kind you remember. She opened it, expecting a neighbor or a delivery. Instead, there he was, Shaquille, all 7 feet 1 inch of him, holding an umbrella too small for his frame, soaked around the edges, and smiling like he didn't care. "I didn't want to text. Felt like this deserved something better," he said. Clarissa blinked, surprised. "Deserved what?" "A proper second date," she stared. And then, slowly, that familiar smile spread across her face. "You call 37 years later a second date?" "I call it a rematch." They drove in his Escalade to a small local gym, rented out just for the evening. The lights were low, the bleachers empty. A single ball sat in the center of the court. Clarissa laughed, spinning in place as she walked inside. "You didn't." "I did," he said. "One-on-one. No cameras, no press. Just me and the girl who used to time my free throws with a stopwatch." She crossed her arms. "You sure you want to do this?" "I still remember how to box out," he chuckled. "Let's find out." They played for almost an hour. Not seriously. Not really. Clarissa dribbled like she hadn't in decades, squealing as Shaq let her drive past him, then blocked her shot with exaggerated flair. "That's a foul, ref," she called out. "Nope," he said, grinning. "All ball." They collapsed onto the court, out of breath and laughing. Shaquille wiped sweat from his brow and stared up at the ceiling beams. "You know," he said, "there were a lot of games in my life. Finals, all-star games, championships, but this one, I missed this one." Clarissa looked over at him, chest rising and falling. "Me too." After that night, things started to shift. Not quickly, not like a movie, but quietly, in ways that mattered. Shaquille would call on Sundays, usually when he was driving. They'd talk about old classmates, documentaries they both liked, or what their kids were up to. Sometimes, Clarissa would get home from work and find flowers on her porch, always with a note written in Shaquille's unmistakable handwriting. From the kid who couldn't shoot free throws to the girl who believed he could. But the world doesn't always stay quiet when someone like Shaquille O'Neal is involved. One afternoon, Clarissa's phone buzzed during her shift. It was her son, Marcus, with a link. No text. Just the link. She tapped it. Shaq spotted with mystery woman in Florida gym. A high school flame. Her breath caught. The photos were blurry, but it was them. Her ponytail, his towering frame. A caption speculating about reunited love. The media had found them. That night, her phone didn't stop ringing. Old friends, colleagues, even a patient asked jokingly if she was dating the Diesel. And then Shaquille called. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I should have known. I should have warned you," she sighed, the exhaustion in her voice clearer than she wanted. "I work with domestic violence survivors, Shaquille. I can't be a headline. I get it. "I'll handle it, I promise," but she didn't want him to handle it. She wanted her life. Quiet, normal, predictable, like it had been. She didn't say any of that. Instead, she just said, "Maybe we press the gas a little fast." There was a pause. "Do you want me to stop calling?" he asked softly. She didn't answer. Days turned into weeks. No flowers, no Sunday calls. The bracelet stayed in her drawer. Clarissa focused on her patients, her routines, her walks. But something was missing now. Not Shaquille the superstar, not the headlines or the courtside seats he once offered, but Shaquille, the boy who stayed after practice, the man who remembered her favorite author, the friend who looked her in the eyes, like time had never passed. March 2025, Gainesville, Florida. Shaquille was on stage at the Florida State Youth Empowerment Conference, delivering the keynote. The room was packed. Hundreds of teens, local politicians, coaches. His speech was smooth, inspirational. Stories of hard work, resilience, believing in yourself. But in the middle of it, he paused. He looked out over the crowd. "You know," he said, lowering the mic, "people talk a lot about the game. About wins, stats, trophies." He held up a finger. "But none of that matters if you don't have someone who believes in you before the game even starts." Silence. The room leaned in. "I had someone like that once, a girl. Brilliant, strong. She saw the man I could be, not the boy I was." His voice wavered. "And I lost her. Not once, but twice." He looked directly into the crowd, into the camera lenses, as if trying to reach someone not in the room. To anyone listening, don't wait 30 years to say how you feel. Don't let the noise make you forget the melody, applause thundered. But Shaquille didn't smile. He stepped off stage and disappeared behind the curtain. Clarissa watched the entire speech from her laptop that night. She didn't cry, not at first. But when he said, "Don't wait 30 years," her hand went to the drawer. She opened it, took out the bracelet, and slipped it on. 3 days later, Shaquille's private court, Orlando. He was shooting around alone when the door opened. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. Clarissa stepped onto the hardwood in flats and a simple blue blouse. No makeup, no script, just her. "You missed a lot of free throws in that speech," she said softly. Shaquille turned. His face lit up, not with surprise, but with something else. Relief, wonder. "I figured I'd let someone smarter write the good lines this time." She stepped closer. "Don't wait 30 years, huh? I meant it." "I know." They stood, a few feet apart, the echoes of 100 memories between them. Shaquille reached out, not demanding, not expecting. Clarissa took his hand. "I don't want headlines," she whispered. "I don't want chaos." He nodded. "Then we keep it ours, just ours." She looked down at the court. "You still owe me that rematch." His eyes twinkled. "Half-court shots only." She smiled. "Deal." They played for hours that day. No cameras, no media, just the squeak of sneakers, the sound of the net, and two hearts finally in sync after all these years. People always said Shaquille O'Neal was the strongest man in the room. From the moment he entered the NBA, he was a giant among giants. 7 feet 1 inch, 325 pounds, a force of nature. He didn't just play the game, he crushed it. Backboards shattered, arenas trembled, but strength, real strength, that came later. April 2025. Shaquille's home, Orlando. Shaq sat alone in his den. TV off, no music, just silence. It had been a month since Clarissa stepped back into his life, not just as a memory, but as something real, tangible, beautiful. But with her came something else too, something heavier, something he had spent years burying beneath laughter, sponsorships, and the glow of celebrity. Shame. He stared at a framed photo on the shelf, him and his children, smiling in a park. All of them still young, innocent. And then, just beside it, was a smaller frame. The one that always faced away from guests. A picture of Lucille O'Neill, his mother. The woman who raised him when his father disappeared. The woman who stood in line to feed him when money was tight. The woman who whispered in his ear after every win, "Don't let the crowd make you forget who you are." He remembered her last voicemail. He hadn't deleted it, couldn't. "Baby, I know you think the world loves you for being big, but the people who matter, they love you for what's underneath." That was the problem. Underneath the persona, underneath the business, the fun, the dominance. Shaquille wasn't sure what was left. Clarissa didn't need his money. She didn't want to walk red carpets. She didn't ask about his deals, his interviews, or what it was like to win rings. She wanted him, and that scared him more than any free throw ever had. That weekend, he invited her to a small dinner, just the two of them. No reservations, no staff, just his kitchen. He cooked, badly. Burnt salmon, undercooked rice, oversteamed broccoli. Clarissa laughed and made a face. "This is ambitious. I call it post-retirement disaster." She raised a brow. "That's supposed to impress me?" "No," he said, pouring wine with a shrug. "Supposed to humble me." She paused, then softened. "Good. You needed it." After dinner, they sat on the couch. Not touching, just close. He turned to her. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Why'd you say no all those years ago, after LSU? After the draft?" Clarissa looked at him, then away. "You already know why." "I don't." She let the silence hang for a moment. "Because I didn't want to be a footnote in your story." He blinked. "You were never a footnote. You were becoming something. Something bigger than life. And I saw how fast the world moved around you. I didn't want to be the girl holding on while the train sped off the rails." She looked at him then. "I wanted you to love me the way I loved you. And I wasn't sure you knew how to." He swallowed hard. Shaquille O'Neal had stared down some of the greatest players of all time. He'd faced Michael, Kobe, Duncan, LeBron. But this honesty? It hit harder than any elbow. He nodded. "I didn't, back then. I didn't know how to sit still. Didn't know how to say I'm scared without sounding weak." He looked down at his hands, massive, calloused, trembling slightly. "But I do now." Clarissa studied him, and for the first time in years, she saw it. Not the player, not the clown, not the businessman, but the boy. The boy who used to stand in front of her locker after practice, pretending he just happened to walk by. The boy who asked her to prom 3 weeks too early, because he was afraid someone else might get there first. The boy who never wanted to be left behind. She reached over and held his hand. "Then maybe we start there." May 2025, downtown Los Angeles. Shaquille had to go back. Not for a game, not for a show, for closure. The Staples Center wasn't even called the Staples Center anymore. It was a different name now, different era. But the ghosts were still there. He walked the tunnel alone. No entourage, no PR team, just him. And the memories. Kobe, Phil, the banners, the boos, the cheers, the fight, the split, the regret. He stood center court and whispered to the empty rafters, "I'm sorry." Not for leaving, but for not knowing how to stay. That night, he called Clarissa. "Hey," he said. His voice was softer than usual. "Hey, can I ask you something else?" "Sure. Do you ever wonder what it would have been like if we'd stayed together back then?" She was quiet. "Sometimes. But then I remember, we weren't ready. You were chasing the world. I was building one," he smiled. "And now we get to write it." Shaquille O'Neal was once the most dominant force in basketball. But domination is easy when you're bigger than everyone else. What's hard? Vulnerability, stillness, letting someone hold your heart without flinching. And for the first time in his life, Shaquille wasn't trying to be the strongest man in the room. He was trying to be the realest one. They say legends never die, but they do fade. The camera stops flashing. The crowds get quieter. The phone rings less. And the man who used to be everything, he becomes a ghost in a highlight reel. Shaquille O'Neal wasn't afraid of that. He welcomed it. Because finally, for the first time in his life, he was ready to live outside the lights. June 2025, Atlanta, Georgia. Shaq hadn't seen his father in over a decade. Not the man who raised him, the man who left, Joseph Tony, the biological father. For years, Shaq avoided the conversation, not out of hate, out of fear. Fear of reopening wounds he'd learned to survive with. Fear of facing a man who gave him up before he ever knew who he was. But one night, as he sat in his home, flipping through an old scrapbook his mother had made, something inside shifted. A photo fell out. It was Joseph, holding a baby, Shaquille, before the absence, before the silence, before the anger. He called. The number hadn't changed. The voice on the other end was older, softer, almost surprised. Shaquille, Shaq paused. Yeah, it's me. Silence. Then, son. Two syllables that hit harder than any dunk ever had. They met at a small diner. No cameras, no press. Just a table by the window and years of silence between them. Joseph looked smaller now. Time had carved its story into his face. He stood as Shaq entered, unsure whether to shake his hand or hug him. Shaq made the decision for him, a simple nod. Then they sat. For the first 10 minutes, it was awkward. Two men, one father, one son, a million things unsaid. Finally, Joseph spoke. I watched everything, every game, every commercial, every ring. Shaq didn't look up. I know. I didn't deserve to be part of it, but I was proud. Every damn second, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a wrinkled paper. A drawing from years ago. A child's scribble of a basketball hoop. And a little boy dunking, labeled, me, Shaquille. Shaq stared at it. His own handwriting, crude, misspelled, innocent. I kept it, Joseph said. Even after I left. Shaq swallowed. The silence this time wasn't awkward, it was sacred. They talked for 2 hours. About nothing. About everything. Joseph apologized. Not just once, but fully. I was scared, weak. I chose the easy way out. And your mother, she gave you a life I couldn't have. Shaq nodded. I used to hate you, but now, I get it. I was scared too. Joseph looked at him, eyes glassy. You became a better man than I ever was. Shaq didn't flinch. I had to be. And then, slowly, he stood and opened his arms. And the man who left was finally hugged by the man who stayed. Later that night, Orlando Clarissa was sitting on the porch swing, barefoot, sipping tea. Shaq sat beside her, unusually quiet. You okay? She asked. He nodded. I met my father today. Her eyebrows rose. And? It was weird, but good, sad, necessary. She placed her hand on his knee. You're healing. He looked at her. Number I'm remembering. Because that's what life is, isn't it? It's not about the trophies, the money, the fame. It's about the things we leave behind, the relationships, the apologies, the hugs we didn't know we needed. Shaq had left behind a legacy on the court, but off the court, he was finally learning how to build one that mattered. Father's Day, June 2025, Shaquille's backyard. All 6 of his children were there. Miles, Sharif, Amira, Mayara, Shakir, Tahira. Different moms, different cities, same blood. For the first time in years, they were all under the same roof. laughing, eating, sharing stories. No TV crews, no fake smiles, just family. Shaq stood at the grill, apron on, tongs in hand. He looked ridiculous, and he'd never felt more at peace. Sharif came over, holding a basketball. "Pop, one-on-one?" Shaq grinned. "You sure you want that smoke?" "Bro, I am the smoke." They played until the sun went down. The court lit only by backyard lights and the sound of laughter. No fans, no endorsements, no trophies on the line. Just a father and his kids. After everyone had gone inside, Shaq sat on the bench. Clarissa joined him, wine in hand. He looked at her. "You ever think about legacy?" She smiled. "All the time." He nodded toward the house. "They're mine. That's my legacy. Not the rings, not the money. Them." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You're finally seeing it." He wrapped his arm around her. "Yeah, took me long enough." Later that night. Alone in his room, Shaquille scrolled through his phone. Photos of his kids, old interviews, highlights, and then he paused. A message. From a name he hadn't seen in years. Kobe Bryant. Sent January 24th, 2020. "Hey, big fella. Proud of you? Proud of what you're doing with your kids. Let's talk soon." Shaq stared at it. A lump formed in his throat. He never replied. He held the phone against his chest and whispered, "Miss you, brother." It was supposed to be just another speech. Shaquille O'Neal had done hundreds of them. Hall of Fame ceremonies, jersey retirements, business conferences. He'd walked onto stages like they were arenas, commanding, loud, larger than life. But this one was different. Because this one wasn't about him. It was about a friend, a brother, a rival, a teammate. It was about Kobe Bryant. February 2025, Los Angeles, California. The lights dimmed in the newly built Kobe Bryant Pavilion. A towering bronze statue of Kobe stood at the center, forever locked in his fadeaway. The arena was full. Legends in the front row. MJ Magic, LeBron, Kareem, D-Wade. Steph. But all eyes were on one man, Shaquille O'Neal, as he stepped up to the mic. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, towering silent. His massive frame dwarfed even the microphone. And then he exhaled, looked up, and spoke. "I always thought I'd go first." He paused. The crowd froze. Shaq continued, voice lower now. "I was the big man, the enforcer, the older brother. I thought I'd be the one in the casket, not him." He looked at the statue. "That's how life works, though. It doesn't care about the order. It just takes." He told stories. The first time they met in 1996, Kobe was 17, skinny, cocky, brilliant. He challenged me to a one-on-one after practice, like I hadn't just finished dropping 30 in scrimmage. Laughter. But he was different, obsessed, built like a monk disguised as a killer. He spoke about their fights, their clashes, their cold wars in the locker room. He wanted greatness. I wanted dominance. We were fire and oil. But together, we burned the league down. He paused again, swallowed hard. And this time, his voice cracked. "You know the last text Kobe sent me?" The room held its breath. He said, "Big fella, proud of you. Proud of how you're raising your kids. Let's talk soon." Shaq looked away for a second. I never answered. The silence was deafening. He looked back at the crowd and whispered, "I thought we had more time." Because the truth is, no matter how big you are, how loud, how powerful, there are some things you can't block out. Grief, regret, memory, they find a way in, even in giants. But Shaq didn't stay in the grief. He did something else. He made a promise. On that stage, in front of legends and lights, he looked at Vanessa Bryant in the front row, then up at Kobe's daughters, and said, I'll watch over them. I swear to you, I'll be there. Birthdays, games, graduations, anything they need. Kobe gave me everything. This is how I give back." After the ceremony, Shaq didn't go to the after party. He sat alone in the old Staples Center, now renamed, but forever sacred to him. He walked down to the court, no one else there. He stood at the free throw line, looked at the rafters, his jersey, Kobe's, side by side, forever. He closed his eyes and whispered, "We did it, Mamba. We made him remember." March 2025. Boston Shaq was invited to speak to a group of young athletes at a juvenile detention center, the same kind of place where many kids never make it out. He walked in. No cameras, no entourage, just him and broken kids. He didn't give them stats, didn't show highlight reels. He sat down and told them the truth. "I used to be just like you," he said. "Angry, confused, loud. Nobody understood me, except the court." He looked around the room. "You think you're hard? Try growing up with a name like Shaquille. Try being broke. Try watching your mom cry in the kitchen and not being able to do nothing about it." He leaned forward. "But I made a promise to her, to my stepdad, to myself, that I'd never go back to that life." He pulled out a photo. Him and Kobe, laughing, champagne flying. This was the peak, but it started in the dark, just like you. One of the kids raised a hand. "What do you miss most?" Shaq didn't hesitate. "Time," he stood. "Make sure you use yours better than I did." That's what this chapter of Shaq's life had become, a mission. To use his size to lift others. To use his voice to inspire the voiceless. To turn pain into purpose. May 2025. Inside the O'Neal family living room, Shaq was watching home videos. On the screen, a grainy tape from 2000. Kobe and Shaq dancing in the locker room after their first championship. He laughed, then paused, then wiped his eye. Clarissa walked in. "You okay?" He nodded. "Yeah, I finally get it." She tilted her head. "Get what?" He looked at her, eyes clear. "What greatness really means. It's not the rings, not the banners, not the statues. It's who remembers you when you're gone." The world knew Shaquille O'Neal as the big man, the enforcer, the dominator. But few people ever met Shaquille the father. And for a long time, he didn't really know him either. Summer 2007. Miami Shaq sat alone on the beach, divorced, distant from his kids, drowning in silence. The waves crashed, the wind howled, but all he could hear was the last thing his son said to him before he left. "You were always there for the world, just never really there for us." That line stayed with him, not like a jab, more like a knife, not immediate pain, just a slow cut that never healed. Because no amount of all-star selections, no MVP trophies, no platinum records, no TV shows, could replace what he'd lost. His family. Shaq always thought love looked like protection, like food on the table, shoes on their feet. But what they really wanted was his time, his voice, his presence, his dadness. So, for the first time since his rookie year, Shaquille O'Neal walked away from the game, not because he was broken, but because he wanted to be whole. 2010. Atlanta suburb Shaq wasn't in an arena. He was in a minivan, singing "Let It Go" at full volume with his daughter in the back seat. He wasn't lifting championship trophies. He was lifting his son up to shoot his first basket. He wasn't signing autographs. He was helping with algebra, failing at it, but showing up. And somehow, that meant more than any 40-point game ever did. He once said on camera, "I made millions being Superman, but the best thing I ever did was become Clark Kent." Because when the lights fade, when the crowds go home, when your name stops trending, All that remains is what you built behind the scenes. And Shaq? He rebuilt his family. Brick by brick, moment by moment. Not perfectly, but honestly. He started calling his kids every day. Even when they didn't pick up, he texted them good morning. Even when they didn't reply, he apologized, not with grand gestures, but with consistency. And slowly, they let him back in. Shakir's high school graduation, 2022. Shaq sat in the front row. Not courtside, just front row dad section. He clapped the loudest, cried the hardest. When his son took the stage, he looked at Shaq and said, "This man right here, he was the MVP of my senior year." Shaq smiled. And for once, it wasn't the grin of the diesel. It was the smile of a man who finally got it. Later that night, Shaq sat on his back patio with his sons and daughters. They were roasting marshmallows, telling stories. And his youngest daughter looked up and asked, "Daddy, were you always this fun?" Shaq laughed. "Nope," she giggled. What changed? He looked up at the stars and answered, "I stopped trying to be everyone's hero and finally became yours." That's the thing about legacy. It's not made in arenas. It's made at dinner tables, in long drives, in quiet moments, in second chances. And when people asked him now, "What are you most proud of?" he didn't say rings, didn't say business deals, didn't say fame. He pointed to his family and said, "Them. I'm finally the dad they needed me to be." 2024. O'Neill Family Christmas Shack gave each child a framed photo. Inside, a picture of him holding each of them as babies. On the back, a note. "I didn't always get it right, but I never stopped trying to earn this title. Dad." That Christmas. There were no reporters, no press releases, just hugs, just healing, just love. The world remembers Shaquille O'Neal for what he did on the court. But his family? They'll remember what he did at home. Shaquille O'Neal's story isn't just about basketball. It's about transformation. The man who once ruled the paint with sheer power and size now rules a different kingdom. After retiring, Shaq's quest for meaning led him beyond the court. He became a mentor, a businessman, a community leader. Las Vegas, 2015. Shaq walked into a high school gym. Not as a celebrity, but as a mentor. The kids stared at him, unsure if this giant was real. He smiled. He told them, "You don't have to be the biggest guy in the room to be the biggest man." He started investing in youth programs, schools, scholarships. He created opportunities he wished he'd had growing up, because Shaq understood talent alone wasn't enough. You needed support. He launched his own brand, not just selling shoes or jerseys, but ideas, dreams. On podcasts, TV shows, and interviews, he spoke about resilience, about humility, about growth. He was more than an athlete, he was a role model. And Shaq's influence grew, not because of what he had done, but because of what he was doing. 2020. During the pandemic, Shaq donated millions to food banks, to health organizations, to families in need. The same hands that once dunked over defenders now helped raise communities. And Shaq never forgot where he came from. The streets of Newark, the struggles, the pain. He became an advocate for education, for mental health, for opportunity. He reminded the world that greatness isn't just trophies or fame. It's the impact you leave on others. One of his proudest moments? Seeing a young athlete he mentored get into college. Seeing families fed because of his efforts. Seeing hope grow. Shaq's legacy is not just in the Hall of Fame. It's in the lives he's touched, the smiles he's created, the chances he's given, and in every way he's shown. That true greatness is measured by the heart. Shaquille O'Neal's legend was forged under the bright lights of NBA arenas, but his life beyond basketball was equally complex and compelling. In the early 2000s, Shaq's towering presence wasn't just felt on hardwood floors, it loomed large in studios, boardrooms, and communities. Despite his larger-than-life persona on TV and in commercials, there was a side of Shaq few saw. Behind the booming laugh and playful antics lay a man searching for balance. He struggled with expectations. The world saw Shaq the unstoppable force, the Hall of Famer, the celebrity. But Shaq knew he was still just a man, one learning how to live beyond the game. Los Angeles, 2003. In the glitzy lights of Hollywood, Shaq walked the red carpet with ease. But behind the camera flashes, he was wrestling with his identity. He was no longer just a basketball player. He was a brand, a businessman, a husband and father. He invested in restaurants, tech startups, and even became a minority owner in sports teams. Each venture was a new challenge, a chance to prove he was more than an athlete. But success came with sacrifice. His marriage to Shawnee Nelson, the mother of his 4 children, faced the strain of public life and personal demands. Shaq's kids became his grounding force. He made sure to be there for them, to teach them about hard work and humility. His relationship with his parents, Joe and Lucille, remained a source of strength. They reminded him of his roots when fame threatened to cloud his sense of self. Shaq also found joy in giving back. He launched scholarships in Newark, his hometown, to help kids get a shot at education and sports. And he found a new stage as a beloved TV personality. From analyst on Inside the NBA to DJ Diesel in clubs, Shaq embraced his many passions with infectious energy. But with all the public spotlight, Shaq admitted he had moments of doubt, times when the pressure felt overwhelming. He once confided, "Being Shaq means carrying a lot of weight, from expectations, from the world. But I learned that it's okay to ask for help, to be vulnerable." His journey was about learning to be authentic, to live fully, on his terms. And through it all, Shaq never forgot the boy from Newark who dreamed big, the boy who practiced jump shots in the cold and imagined a future brighter than the streets around him. That dream never died. It just grew. They called him Superman, the Big Aristotle, the Diesel, Shock 2's MDE. But when the dust settles and the lights fade, the man behind those nicknames, Shaquille Rashawn O'Neal, leaves behind something even greater than dominance. He leaves a legacy. Springfield, Massachusetts, 2016. The room was quiet. Not the kind of quiet that comes from silence, but the kind that settles when reverence fills the air. Shaquille O'Neal stepped onto the stage of the Naismith Memorial Basketball Hall of Fame. His bronze face, now eternalized, looked down with that familiar grin, that mix of power, playfulness, and peace. But the man standing at the podium wasn't just looking back. He was reflecting forward. "I always said, if I can help just one kid believe in himself, just one, then all the dunks, all the wins, all the noise, it was worth it." Because for Shaq, the rings were never just rings. They were reminders of struggle, of sacrifice, of childhood mornings spent in Newark housing projects, waiting for the school bus, clutching a basketball instead of a backpack, of military bases, discipline, and the quiet mentorship of Sergeant Philip Harrison, the stepfather who gave him structure and standards, of Lucille O'Neal, his mother, who prayed over him every night, even when he thought he didn't need it. Shaq stood tall that night, not just because of his 7 feet 1 inch frame, but because of the road it took to get there. A road filled with bruised knees, bitter rivalries, broken alliances, and, ultimately, growth. People saw Shaq as a giant, but they didn't always see the growth behind the size. They didn't see how he studied business at LSU, earning degrees in between seasons, how he quietly donated millions to charities, funerals for strangers, or surprise shopping trips for single mothers. They didn't always hear the phone calls to Kobe's parents after the tragedy, or the times he drove across town just to speak at a school in a rough neighborhood. No cameras, no press. Just Shaq being the man he promised himself he'd become. His legacy? Yes. He was the most dominant ever. Yes, he redefined the center position, tearing backboards down, humiliating seven-footers, and doing it all with a grin. But more than anything, Shaq gave people permission to dream big and laugh louder. He showed that you could be powerful and playful, that you could dominate without dehumanizing, that joy could be a weapon, and that being larger than life wasn't just about physical size, it was about how much life you put into the world. There will be other giants, other athletes who change the game, but there will never be another Shaquille O'Neal. He was an avalanche in sneakers, a philosopher in a jersey, a guardian of joy. Shaq stands in his mansion, his kids running through the hallway, DJ turntables spinning in the background, an email from a business partner flashing across his phone, a charity check left unsigned on his kitchen counter. He pauses for a second, walks to a room filled with trophies, jerseys, and memories. He doesn't say much, just stares at a photo of his stepfather. Then, quietly, to himself, "We did it, Dad. I told you I'd make you proud." Shaq walks away. The door slowly shuts behind him. Not with a bang, but with peace. Because legends don't end. They echo. I hope you like this story. Let me know about your thoughts in the comment section.